Welcome back to the Arboretum. I'm Jesse Dahl. I'm the senior horticulturist here at the Arboretum, and I've been a certified arborist since 2008. And a certified arborist are those that deal with trees. They prune trees a lot of times and plant trees. Today we're going to talk about how to prune a younger tree. For most people this is doable, and that's why we want to do a video. So we're going to talk about how to prune younger trees. And if we prune them when they're young, it'll save us a lot of time, effort, and money. When they get older, we won't have to do as much or anything once they get older and are mature. So first, we'll talk about tools. What are you going to need? A pair of loppers, hand pruners. The difference between these two, they operate about the same. Hand pruners are for about up to a ½ inch. Loppers for about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. Anything bigger than that, you're going to want to use a hand saw. And so with these three things, you can prune most younger trees. The type of pruners you want to get with the loppers and the hand pruners are a bypass. That means that the blade is passing this other section here, and it cuts it off kind of like a pair of scissors. There's another type you can find, and you may have, called Anvil, and this cuts down, so there's a blade and then a flat spot, and it cuts on that flat spot. When it does that, it smushes the wood. These are good for dead wood. So if you're working with grapevines or something for decorations, but they're not really good for pruning because they leave a smash cut. It's not as clean and it won't seal over as quickly. So a couple things we're going to talk about today. For younger trees, there's several things we want to go over. Right after you plant the tree, you want to do almost no pruning for that first year. If there's something that's broken, something that's badly damaged, you got scraped up, you can prune that off. But other than that, you want to just leave it alone. It's got to get its roots established. It went through a lot of trauma being pulled out of a pot or out of a balled and burlapped or whatever and planted. So you just want to leave it alone. After about the first year, then you can start training and pruning on it. And when we do this, we don't want to remove ever more than about 1/3 to 1/4. Especially with those first year, you want to remove as little as possible or nothing if possible. So what we're going to remove first, you got the 3 Ds, dead, diseased, and damaged. So anything that's dead, diseased, or damaged gets removed. We can also work on water sprouts and suckers. Here on this magnolia, you can see there's lots of water sprouts and suckers coming off the base. With a lot of your trees like crab apples, cherries, magnolias, they've been grafted. And so a lot of the root stock is coming up, and so we want to prune that off. If you don't, you'll end up with it will overtake what's on top, and you'll end up with another type of tree that you didn't really want. So we can take those water sprouts and suckers off, and then we're going to make some, there's a couple of things we want to do. We want to look at the structure of the tree. Where do you want your lowest branch to be? Do you want it to be 10 foot up in the air? Do you need to drive underneath it with your car in your driveway or along the street? Or can it go nearly to the ground? You're going to want to make those judgments early. If you can prune it off with a pair of hand pruners, that will seal over in a couple of months. If you have to prune it off with a chainsaw once it gets older, those wounds may never seal up, and that's just an area for decay to get into the tree and eventually kill that tree. So it's better to make those decisions when it's young. If it's going to be really tall, you don't want to do it all at the same time. You can remove one branch every year or two until you've got it limbed up the height you want it. Or if you want it more thinner, or if it needs to stay lower, you can start working on the top. But this idea, when you're pruning it when it's younger, you can make a lot smaller cuts. They're a lot easier cuts. It takes you a lot less time, just a couple minutes per tree. But it will save you a lot of time and money in the future. So we're going to look at a few of these cuts. First, we'll start off on this one. There's not much dead or damage, so I'm going to start off with the water sprouts. Okay, so what's the difference between a water sprout and a sucker? Water sprout is one that comes off the tree. So you see this one here. It's growing right off the tree trunk. It's growing straight up. That would be a water sprout. And so when you prune these, you're going to want to go to the branch collar. You can see a light area and then it transitioned to dark. You want to prune it right at that level. You don't want to flush cut it. You don't want to just cut that straight off. But it'll take a lot longer for it to seal. So you want to cut right at that branch collar. And then suckers come up from the ground. And so it's coming off of the roots. And so you can just cut those level with the ground. If you want, you can actually expose those some and cut them a little bit deeper so you can get a bigger one. This one we might have to use a pair of loppers. And if you have a tree that creates water sprouts, it's probably going to be a perennial problem. You're probably going to be pruning a couple of those off every year forever. Some crab apples are really bad with it, but it's just something you're going to have to pay attention to. So there are a lot of trees that have perennial problems with water sprouts and suckers, especially with the suckers. There's like crab apples, and a lot of those you're going to be pruning with dealing with every year, having to cut those off. Some crab apples are worse than others. You can find cultivars that are better and don't sucker as much, but for most trees, especially the flowering trees that are grafted, that's going to be a perennial problem. You're going to have to be pruning those off every year or two, as long as the tree is alive. Okay, we've looked at all of the 3Ds, the dead, damaged, and diseased. Looked through the tree and pruned it and cleaned those out. We've removed the water sprouts and suckers. Now we need to think about structural pruning. What is going to be for the longevity, the health of the tree? One of those is how low do we want our lowest branch to be? We've talked about that a little bit. Also, we need to think about how thick we are inside here. If there's a lot of branches coming from the same spot, if there's branches that are rubbing, we can thin some of those out so they're not rubbing. It also opens up the center of the tree to allow air and light in there so we can get better airflow and less fungal problems. We need to look at the top of the tree, whether we have a single leader or not. A single leader is one stem that goes up to the very top, and you want that in most of your trees. There's a few trees like elms that will have multiple leaders, but most of our trees we want to prune to that single leader, and we want to remove anything that is trying to be a single leader. The reason why is once they get older, is if there's 2 leaders, and you'll see this on some trees, they will split in half, or if there's 3, they can split into thirds. It really shortens the longevity and the lifespan of that tree. So we want a single leader, so we'll look at that, look if there's any branches that are close, and then we will look at how far up we want our bottom branches to be, and maybe prune off 1 or 2 if we want to raise it up some. Okay, on this tree, this is a magnolia. It's got this other branch that is vying for dominance as well with the single leader. And so you don't have to prune these branches all the way off. We're going to shorten this one a little bit. So we're going to take it off right there. And with that, now it's no longer vying for control with the single leader. It will create its own branches, and it'll help feed and create a nice tree. So you saw in this tree, we didn't really remove that much. Just some water sprouts and a little dead in that one leader that was vying for dominance. And for most of your younger trees, that's all you're going to be pruning off. It's just a few things. And if you do that every year and keep on that, when that tree starts to get to maturity, starts getting really tall, where you're going to need a bucket truck or a ladder, there'll be very few, if any, problems you're going to have to deal with, and that tree can last your lifetime. But if you don't do those things now, you're going to have to make up for it later once that stuff is a lot bigger. So it's best to do it when it's young. Again, like I said, right after, about a year or so after you've planted it, don't do anything that first year. And thank you for watching this video with us. Come out here and walk around and visit the Arboretum. Thank you.